I would now like to call on our second keynote speaker, Mr. Alvin Lau, who is the President and CEO of DNL Industries. DNL is a Filipino company engaged in product customization and specialization for the food, plastics, and aerosol industries. It has the largest market share in each of these industries it serves, as well as long-standing customer relationship with the Philippines' leading consumer and chemical companies. Alvin?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to SharePHIL for inviting me to share the D&L story and how we became a simple family business and are now listed in the stock exchange. So a little caveat, I'm not a CPA or a business major. I'm actually a geek. I double majored in IT and statistics. But I got my MBA. DNL is actually the third of our family's listings. And later on, I'll talk a little bit about that. But my purpose this afternoon is really just to tell you our story of what we went through from being a family business and why an IPO made a lot of sense for us. And I hope you find value in it. So, a little bit about our company. It's a little harder to understand what we do in DNL because we don't make anything that consumers buy or use directly. We are a B2B company. Our customers are primarily all businesses as well. So the major divisions we have 4 categories. Number 1, our biggest category is food. We make a lot of ingredients used in food. So everything from your fast food chains to what you buy in the supermarket and so on. A lot of the ingredients used in these products are made by us. Second division, there was a listed company before called Chemres Technologies. So for those of you who had invested in the stock market before, Chemres was known as a manufacturer of biodiesel. We also make other chemicals used, raw materials, again, for products like paints and plastic containers and so forth. Our third division is a plastics ingredients manufacturing company. So again, we don't make anything made from plastic, but we make a lot of raw materials, which manufacturers then use. So we are a provider of raw materials. And finally, we are a one-stop shop for aerosol manufacturing. So almost all of the aerosol products made in the Philippines, about 90%, if it's made in the Philippines, it's actually made by us for various companies, various customers, and various brands. So those are our 4 main segments. So we are a 55-year-old company. We started business in 1963. The reason why it's called D&L Industries is because the names of the 2 founders, there are 2 brothers, Dean and Leon Lau. So actually the story behind this is my father is Leon, and together with his eldest brother, Dean, and his third brother, Alex, the 3 of them are chemical engineers. So when they were looking at starting a business, they thought of all these fancy names, you know, Philippine Chemical Company and so on, but the SEC rejected them all because they were all taken. So they just thought, why don't we just use our initials? So that's why it's called D&L. So actually, there are 5 brothers in that generation. So my father and 4 uncles, they were the start of how our company started in 1963. And then over time, as you can see, we added more businesses, more companies. So the first time we went public was in the year 2000. So what happened was we started with a company called Corocoat. Most of you would probably not remember this because Corocoat was a really small company. I think at the peak, its market cap reached maybe something like $4 million US dollars. It was really small. And then in 2006, that's when we listed ChemRes, and then 2012 was the IPO of DNL. So earlier, Lorraine had talked about the family business and what it's like to be in a family business. So very important for us is to look at what defines a family business. What makes family businesses different from your other businesses? So for us, a lot of it boils down to the values that are created in a family business. So the owners who start the business, their values really cascade down towards the rest of the company. And you have other things that you really see are strengths in a family business. Things like loyalty, pride, cohesiveness, which gives everything meaning. So one of the things that as a family business we really tried to create and do is to create what's called a constitution, a family constitution. And this is really the foundation of how family businesses operate. So for us, it included things like forming trusts which have ownership of our shares in the family business. And we have other rules. For example, before a family member can enter the family business, they must graduate from college, work outside for at least 2 years. We need to start from the bottom. So even when I already had my MBA, I started as a management trainee for 1 year in DNL. And then no sidelines allowed. 100% of our focus has to be in the business. We also have a rule where we don't employ in-laws, or in-laws are outlawed. Not that we don't believe the in-laws will not have any contribution. It's really just to separate the personal issues from the business issues. And then we created a family office as well. So our vision for the future, you can imagine it's quite consistent with how most businesses see themselves. Things like targeting growth, the talent in the company, and of course, everyone working together, planning for the future. So why would a business go public? Why would our family business consider going public? So Lorraine had talked about that 3-generation curse, which is something our family is very aware of, and we would also want to avoid. So the idea is that if you are able to improve governance in the business, hopefully you can implement a lot of things which will avoid this 3-generation curse. So there are a lot of studies that have been done about succession in family businesses. So there's really a strong need to professionalize the family business. So in our case, what we did, we established a holding company structure. We also have a lot of people who work with us now, who were with multinational companies and other large corporations, so that we could jumpstart how we learn and how we adapt best practices. We implemented ISO 9000 certification and other important standards. And we also brought on board very credible auditor to start auditing our books before we even did our IPO. And of course, having the IPO there's an automatic requirement to improve governance, and you also need independent directors on your board. So on the board, is a list of some of the traditional reasons why companies do an IPO. So I won't go through all of them, but I would say we are mostly familiar with these reasons. But for us, one big key factor is being a listed company really gives us more options. Okay. There are also non-traditional reasons for doing an IPO, which we felt very strongly about. So as a business owner, for many business owners, actually, it's not about the money. It's not about your income. A lot of it is actually keeping score, making things better than what you had before. So having a listed company with a very visible share price it provides an easy way to, again, keep track of a metric that you can improve. There's also estate planning. So I would say, well, especially in our market here in the Philippines, the transfer of shares from one generation to the next, if the company is listed, is a relatively low tax event, unlike in most other countries. But that is one huge reason why an IPO, especially in the Philippines, makes sense. For us, we also saw the IPO as an opportunity to create that sense of pride that our employees have with the company. So we're not a consumer brand company. We don't have products or we don't have brands that our people can rally around. So it made it a little harder for us to continue to motivate our people or to inspire them. Having that listed company just made it a lot easier. Of course, there's financial discipline. My dad told me the story before where at the end of his golf game, he would go to his locker, and the guy whose locker was next to his would make kamusta and greet him about the share price. So just that, even if you're on the golf course, even if you're out of the office, you are reminded, about work and about how you need to be really good in the business. And this is something Lorraine also mentioned earlier, the legacy for the founders. That's something that an IPO does. So all of these these are additional competitive advantages that we can get simply by being a listed company. Now, there are a lot of reasons why family businesses or business owners decide not to do an IPO. And here I've listed a couple. And I've also mentioned here reasons why these disadvantages don't necessarily apply. So first, a lot of people are afraid or concerned about the loss of privacy. So suddenly, the names of the owners, how much they own, what the company does, the revenue, income are public information. But the reality is, in the world of social media, in the world of easy access, you can now easily download income statements from various websites. It doesn't really apply anymore. The other thing is, sure, as a listed company, you have to produce annual reports. But in the Philippines, I believe less than 2-3% of Filipinos have stockbroker accounts. And out of that, maybe less than 10% would even bother to read annual reports. So that added exposure of family members, of how the business operates, it's not necessarily as widespread. So that applies as well to information about the business. Yes, you do have to disclose more, but you can limit what you talk about to just the non-confidential information. Also, financial information is just much easier to obtain today. There are concerns about losing that leverage you have with your customers and suppliers. But again, because many people already know how well your business is doing, it's not really a secret anymore. Number 4, an IPO is really not that expensive. Sure, you do have to pay a lot to your various underwriters, lawyers, and so on. But if you look at what you achieve at the end of it, that small investment does reap a huge benefit. Number 5, being a listed company might be a distraction to the owners and to the executives. Sure, you have to do more things that you weren't doing before, like investor relations and so on. But most of this is really short-term during the IPO period. Number 6, future growth pressure. So some people see this as a negative. When you're listed, you are under the radar. Lorraine called it being in a glass house. But at the end of the day, isn't this pressure, at the end of the day, good for you? It will force you to continue to be better, to continue to grow. So that's not necessarily a disadvantage. 7, trading restrictions. You can't trade your shares all the time. There are blackout periods, but that's fine. There are many other periods where you can trade. You just need to disclose your trades. Number 8, that dilution of control. So our company, float, is about 31%. So the family still owns 69%. We have given up a big chunk of ownership in the company, but we still have absolute majority, significant control over the company. So no real loss of control at all. Sorry, it's a long list. I'm almost done. Transparency and taxation. So when you're listed, you are forced to be honest. You have to pay all your taxes. I don't see this as a disadvantage because the various authorities, like the BIR, are getting much better at tracking what you're really making. So might as well pay everything and be legit, right? Number 10, selling shares for a lower price than their perceived worth. And this is something we see a lot. Many businesses, the owners have a desired value for their company, but the market may not share or agree with that desired value. But at the end of the day, who's right? The owner or the financial markets? So at the end of the day, the best price is where the buyers and the sellers meet, right? That's what we learned in business school. So it's one way to find out what is that business truly worth. Number 11, I hear this a lot. I don't need the money. Sure, you may have a lot of cash either in your bank account or in the company's bank account. But think about this. What if your number one competitor suddenly had 1 billion pesos, 10 billion pesos, $1 billion because they did their IPO or they got funding and they're going to spend against you? How would you react? Would you be able to react well? So if you were listed and you had that cash, would it make you more competitive? So that's something I believe we're thinking about. So our first IPO was in the year 2000, the company called Corocode. The second one was in 2006. So when we listed Chemres, it was actually a backdoor listing. We used Corocode as the listing vehicle. We changed the name to Chemres, and that was done in 2006. And then in 2012, we did the IPO of DNL. And in 2014, we bought back the outside shareholders of, so DNL owned part of Chemres initially. We bought back the remaining shareholders in 2014 via a tender offer. So Chemres was delisted after. So 6 years after the IPO, our market cap has gone up from 15 billion pesos. It's now 72 billion pesos. In terms of the biggest companies by market cap in the Philippines, we're now ranked 45. And our foreign ownership is at roughly 20%. So what did we do right? So there are a few things that helped us. First, we had a lot of practice because DNL was actually our third time to list. So we kind of knew already, what we could focus on, what we could set aside. We were lucky, we have a growing business in the right space. The Philippines is still very much a young economy, but growing fast. So right place, right time. We had a public float that's large enough. When we floated DNL, the float was 34.5%. We left money on the table. Our IPO price was at a reasonable 11 times PE. And that was when the market was trading at, I believe, 14, 15 times PE. We are actively engaged with investors. We're regularly joining roadshows and so on. We do a lot to treat minority shareholders fairly, and we have owners who are really on board with the whole thing. So other things that we do to improve governance and transparency. So as you can see on the slide, we have a lot of touch points with our investors, whether it's through conferences or meetings, various countries. This shows you that our foreign ownership has been going up over time. Even this year, you'll see that foreign ownership has gone up. It's now at almost 20%. And then similar to Wilcon, out of 7 directors, 4 of our directors are independent. This is something that we only achieved starting last year. It's something that we definitely will continue. Actually, one of my goals is eventually, we will even have more independent directors on our board. That's something that I personally would like to do. Even across our management team. So normally in a family business, you would have senior people in management. We do have a lot of senior people in management, but 2 of our most senior positions, our COO and CFO, are actually non-family members. So that's something we have extended to our executives as well. These are some of the awards we have won as a company over the years. Okay, so was the IPO worth it? Financially, definitely. You can see from the increase in the market cap, the share price, the value. So our family's largest asset is DNL, and the value has increased tremendously. It's also helped us achieve a low cost of debt. I believe our average cost of debt right now is still roughly at 4%. So that's, again, because our banks really trust that we have transparent financials. They see the growth. So they end up fighting over our business. That's why we can negotiate really good rates. And we also have that, we always have that option. Any listed company has that option to sell more shares in the future to finance further growth. So we have a lot of flexibility. From a strategic perspective, yes, the IPO made sense. It gives us currency to do things like acquisitions. If one day the family decides it wants to exit, that can be done easier also when the business is listed. And from a family business perspective, definitely yes, the IPO made a lot of sense. So we were able to achieve with the IPO a lot of things so a lot of the advantages I talked about, definitely we did achieve them. Okay. So is an IPO for you? So the first priority, of course, is in your business, the owners have to all be in agreement. This is what you need to do. And the owners need to be on top of the process as well. You need to do this when that IPO window is open. It's not always open. And it involves a lot of people. You have to have that minimum float of 20%. And you also have to consider what your competition is doing. If you decide to do an IPO, you do need that underwriter. Their role is crucial. So work with someone you know or that you can trust and have that transparency with all of your information. You have to start that from even today because that is where you are headed towards when you are a listed company. And you have to be willing to meet with investors who have all kinds of questions about your company, about your direction, your vision, and so forth. I would also highly encourage your employees to become shareholders. So I think it's something that Wilcon did as well. We invited all of our employees to participate in the IPO. And if the IPO timing isn't right, just prepare. Eventually, that time will come. So today's take-home value. If you do decide to do an IPO, I'd be happy to meet with you and to give you free advice, no charge. There's no limit, there's no expiry to this offer, but no guarantee that your share price will go up. Thank you very much.